Hey students, this is the second video on the elements and principles of design. You need the worksheet that we started in the first video. We got exactly halfway through. You just need something to write with. I'm writing with a red pen, just so I'm hoping you can find that easier and take notes easier off what I'm talking about. So let's get started. By the way, I learned something today. I was using too much memory on my videos, so I had to put some of them in a folder. Anyway, I don't know about you, but I'm always learning. So in some ways, 2020 has been a big year of learning for me, and I hope that you're appreciating the learning that's happening as best as us teachers can, helping you through this time. Okay, so right now I'm going to talk about balance. Balance is very important. It's for the formal, we have our formal explanations and a brief. The formal ones, artists like to talk about things concisely, but to me, this is what it really means. That's why I'm giving you two. So balance refers to the distribution of visual weight in a work of art. In a painting, it is the visual, we've got this wonderful word called equilibrium, the visual equilibrium of the elements that causes the total image to appear balanced. Balance can be either symmetrical or asymmetrical in a work of art. And we're going to actually talk about this in our assignment that's coming up. So what do we mean by visual weight? Let's say this is your piece of paper, and I have an elephant over here. And it looks exactly like an elephant, like all drawings do. Anyway, sorry, so it feels heavy here. So what I need to do is balance my design so that maybe it doesn't feel so heavy. So maybe I've added some trees in the background and maybe some clouds. So now it's balanced, even though it's all about the elephant and his weight, the way the paper sits. It feels better than just having this literally big heavy object here, whatever the object is. We want it to appear and feel balanced. Okay, abbreviated explanation. The visual weight of the design in the art piece. How does it feel like it sits there on the page? So the visual weight, and this is a slightly tricky one, of the design in an art piece. So I have two art pieces to show you, the visual weight of the design in an art piece. Two art pieces to show you. This one here is symmetrically balanced. This is actually Rembrandt's son, they think. This is at the Norton assignment. He's pretty much right in the middle. Even though both halves are not exactly the same, it's as if they were. So it's balanced. It feels, remember something, if something's important, we can put it right in the middle. It feels good. It's balanced. It's up here. His eyes are right on the third. Boom. Anyway, so it's nicely balanced. We know what to do when we look at it. It feels good. Now, same head way down here with a whole bunch of black background would not feel balanced. It would feel funny. So this is balanced in a symmetrical way. Here's another one that's also balanced, but this is asymmetrical, which means it's not right in the middle, that one side is stronger than the other one. For instance, all these larger buildings here that are close to us, more people, more details over here, and as far as space goes, it's occupying more of the composition, and then less over here. But see how the clouds are more interesting over here and the color blue. So they've done some things to balance it, but this is asymmetrical. One side's stronger than the other side. So two kinds of balance, but it's a gutsy thing, like does it feel right? And then you have to work on your composition to make it work. The next one is movement. We talk about movement a lot. Visual movement is used by artists to direct viewers, we'll call that innocent bystanders, through their work, often to focal areas, areas of high interest, centers of interest, those types of things. Such movement can be directed along lines, edges, shapes, and colors within the works, but moves the eye most easily on paths of equal value. So if something's kind of similar as far as your lights and darks go, you tend to follow that. If it's very similar, like the same use of a color or the same this or that, it moves you along better. Equal or similar things move you around. So a visual movement isn't always used in art, but it's very important, and it's something you have a lot of power with. So I'm going to, another explanation for this is direction or repetition. Remember, repetition causes movement in design, causing the viewer to look around, causing the viewer to look around and hopefully find the center of interest and so on. So a nice example of movement, I may have even talked about this one before. This is a painting, I think it's by Raphael. Yes, it is. Very famous artist, of course, and we studied him in our classes. So this painting is located really close to our school. So movement, we're just drawn in this kind of triangular shape around and around and around and around, getting us to look at mostly this area of the baby Jesus looking at his mother Mary. So what have they done? They've given us these similar shapes, which are like kind of round, kind of plumpy areas of skin that we follow around. There's a little bit of this red here that we follow around as well. We definitely follow this cape around, and see how the cape goes right across her lap and up and around. Now, normally you wouldn't necessarily wear it that way, but he's designed it that way just to keep us around and around and around. And you can't even leave. It's really blocked off by these hard edges. There is some depth, but you're really concentrated right here. So very strong use of repetition to create movement. And that's what you're kind of controlling a lot with art. Okay, the next one is rhythm. Rhythm is the repetition. So we're getting real specific here. A visual movement. So what is movement? It often uses rhythm. Rhythm is the repetition of visual movement of the elements, colors, shapes, lines, values, forms, spaces, and even textures. Variety is essential to keep the rhythm exciting and active. Like the painting I just showed you, it had more than one way of having repetition. And to avoid monotony. I'll put that word over here, monotony. That means too much of the same thing, mono being one. Movement and rhythm work together to create the visual equivalent of a musical beat, which is a lovely thought. So, so what is rhythm? Rhythm, just really simply, that's when we're using repetition causing you to look around. So I'm going to write down repetition that causes movement. So there's different kinds of movement, but a big one is repetition. So repetition that causes movement. So the sample I'm showing you for this one's an interesting painting painted at the end of the 1800s by Lacombe. And it shows these women, I think it's called the chestnut gatherers. Yeah, so the women are out gathering nuts in the forest or in the orchard or whatever. But you'll notice that they have it's used almost like pattern, but the pattern changes. It makes, see the placement of the leaves get smaller and smaller, so we're drawn up. Same with the trees going back, 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 smaller, smaller, the leaves smaller, smaller. So we're drawn to the middle here, which just happens to be the face of our main figure. A repetition of the women kind of going across like this. We're kind of blocked over here, back up into here. So lots of nice movement caused by repetition. Now this is a really nice one because we're going to talk about the difference between repetition and pattern. Pattern just sits there. It's repeated things that don't do anything. But in here, the repetitions move and change and cause you to look around. So you got a movement doing this and a movement kind of doing this. Very, very fun painting. I like it a lot. Okay, contrast. Contrast refers to differences in values, colors, textures, shapes, and other art elements. Contrasts create visual excitement. Did I spell that right? I really made it interesting spelling there. You can like minus 10 points, Rouse. Anyway, interesting visual excitement and add interest to the work of art. If all the art elements, value for example, are the same, the result becomes monotonous. That means too much the same thing and unexciting. So contrasts make things more exciting to look at. And we build contrast, even just using lights and darks builds nice contrast into your art. So for an explanation, abbreviated, use of a variety of opposites, use of a variety, so there's lots of ways to do this, of opposites, large, small, dark, light, cold, warm, smooth, textured, all kinds of opposites, to create dynamic areas, to create dynamic areas. If everything is contrasting everywhere in your painting, then the whole thing's too exciting and it's too much. You build in more contrast to the more exciting or more interesting parts of your piece of art. So a nice example of contrast, this is a Van Gogh, this is Rouse, this is a Cézanne, and this painting at the Norton Simon is actually one of the first ones he ever bought and helped him fall in love with art. But you see this beautiful still life, and it's not quite perfect in some ways, the way he's done the perspective, but it's beautiful to look at, very nicely balanced as well. But contrast, what has he done to make this more interesting? First of all, blue, green, and yellow, orange are color opposites. So he has nice contrasting colors, very bright up here, and then maybe a little bit more calmed down over here where he doesn't especially want you to look. Contrast of really dark areas against lighter areas, pulling your attention up here again. Contrast of shapes of things. These are actually kind of similar, so you have a little bit of this kind of movement. Here's a little something else to make it more interesting. And less contrast of some different types of brush strokes and so on. But the main ones is the lights and darks and the color contrast, making it really kind of powerful visually for a simple painting. So great use of contrast in this masterpiece. Okay, let's turn the page over. What else do we have? Emphasis. Emphasis is used by artists to create dominance. So we already kind of know what's coming with this one. And focus in their work. Artists can emphasize color, value, shapes, and other art elements to achieve dominance. Various kinds of contrasts are used to emphasize the center of interest. So emphasis is when you draw something somewhere, something's more important than other places in the piece of art. And to make something emphasize, typically it's contrast, but you can do other things like movement to pull people towards that area. So the abbreviated explanation is using contrast and compositional design to create dominance. So already here, there's an ant. using contrast and compositional design to create dominance. Dominance and subordination, by the way, are a couple words artists love to use. So doing things to get something more important than other things, typically contrast and then your design. I'm sure there's a million things you can do. So an example of this from the Norton Simon, this is a famous, very large painting called Flight into Egypt. And it shows Mary, who's just had her baby, fleeing Bethlehem because, Herod declared that he wanted all the babies killed. So here, this is actually Joseph right here. They're kind of being led by an angel. Like, look how exciting this is. However, what he's done is he's emphasized Mary and holding Jesus. They're the brightest thing. They're the lightest thing contrasted against one of the darkest things. You have this kind of unusually rich color here that you don't have other places. Notice how this use of red works in a circle, drawing you up, and then the whole thing is one of these. They used to love to compose with triangles, but we have a triangle looking up here. The details are finer, and it's kind of glowing here, where she's a little bit in the dark over here. So we're drawn to look at Mary. Mary is emphasized, she's the whole point. Also notice their legs. There's kind of this pretty curve drawing you up here even with their legs. So very nicely done. Nice use of emphasis. And I encourage you to see that painting one day. It's pretty cool stuff. Okay, the next one is pattern. And pattern is definitely different than rhythm. Pattern uses the art elements in planned or random repetitions. To enhance surfaces of paintings or sculptures. Patterns often occur in nature. Hi, Mr. Ross. I'm on a video right now. And artists use similar repeated motifs to create patterns in their work. Patterns. Pattern increases visual excitement by enriching surface interest. So patterns are used to make things more interesting. For instance, Mr. Rouse was wearing a bow tie. So that pattern on the bow tie makes his clothes more interesting, drawing you up to the center of interest, which is his face. So pattern is this whole thing with planned or random, sometimes it's very, very even, like rows of dots, for instance. That's a very planned repetition. Sometimes it's a little more random, but it comes out looking very, very even. So pattern, for a more simple definition, is an even repetition that's decorative. Even repetition that is decorative. So the purpose of a pattern is just to make something look more interesting or more attractive. Now, when you have repetition that's uneven and moves you around, that's rhythm. There's a whole different reason for the repetition. But repetition that just sits there, like my sweater I'm using that's patterned, it's not causing me really to look anywhere else. It just makes my sweater more interesting. So for an example, this isn't, there's some artwork that has it even stronger, but this is a painting by Monet. And if you notice the flowers here, they don't necessarily keep you looking back and forth. They're kind of evenly placed. There's not particularly a more important area. There's like multiple important areas that are kind of evenly spaced as you look around. So it kind of just sits there. It's kind of a flat painting that kind of sits there. So this is that random pattern. Not everything's all lined up, but it still makes it very, very decorative. This particular painting is very popular. People think it's very pretty because we enjoy pattern. Pattern's fun to look like. It talks about visual excitement by making it more interesting, but it's not especially causing you to look or movement. It's not making you look at the house. You're just kind of looking and enjoying it as far as being decorative or interesting. That's what pattern can do. We're going to work on pattern versus rhythm in our next assignment. And then the last one we have is unity. Visual unity is one of the most important aspects of well-designed art and is planned by the artist. Unity provides the cohesive quality that makes an artwork feel complete and finished. Is it unified? Is it whole? Does it work well together? When all the elements in a work look as though they belong together, then the artist has achieved unity. So when everything's working together and it looks nice and feels good, it's somehow unified, then the art piece can be considered done. If something's wrong or distracting or doesn't work or doesn't fit, then you're lacking in the area of unity. A masterful painting will have a good control of its unity, and somebody slightly less masterful, this would be one of the areas they're having a hard time working with. So I will say a similar abbreviation would be use of similar elements like color, use of similar elements like color to create an art piece that functions well as a whole. That I'm really writing large right now. So everything's working well together. So an example, like pretty much all of these things I've been showing you had nice looking unity. So an example is here is a Dancer by Degas, and he did quite a lot of drawings with pastels involving dancers. But this one's especially nicely unified, things that he's done to unify it. Well, first of all, the use of color. You see this, I think this sand or something blowing, because here we are at the ocean, is very similar to her skin tone. So we have these warm colors, very similar. The whole thing pretty much has those warm colors. We have a couple bright areas. If you didn't have the blue here, the red would be standing out too much. See, there's a nice kind of, you need the blue, you need the red to help it pop out. All other things that are unified is this kind of soft curves, which are also on her. Often when artists will use curves in drawings and paintings when there's women involved to keep it kind of this gentle, graceful look to it. If that's what you want your woman to look like, you would maybe repeat those types of things. There's nothing that feels too different or doesn't belong. Looks like she has some type of crown here or something, but it's right there where her face is in this whole center of interest type area right here. So it's not really bothering us at all. So he's done lots of things. He's even unified the flow. This comes here, and look at this, right on the third again, to keep it well together. So if it was, this was like lime green over here, it wouldn't be unified anymore. It'd be thrown out of balance, you know, too much use of too bright colors or something. But it doesn't always have to be this simplified, but this is a good example of what unity can look like in a piece of art. So that's our elements and principles of design. I hope it was interesting. We don't always get to talk about stuff like this, but it's really important. Take this with you next time you go to an art museum, or just take the words and you'll be able to talk about anything you're seeing. It'll be really obvious and a nice way to talk about art, write about art. If you need to write about art for your English class or anything, or history, you know, pull out these 14 words. They're really going to help you.